Let's travel back to 1994. I remember Bill Clinton was president. He was on the news a ton, some stuff about nuclear bombs or something. All I know is he played sax on Arsenio Hall one time. Oh, and OJ was on TV running from the cops in his sweet Ford Bronco. I was only 9 years old though, and for me, it was all about my Super Nintendo. There were a ton of amazing games coming out for the system that year. Thanks to my local video store, my friends and I played through all the hits. Games I'll never forget. One of the games we did not play though was Shaq Fu. Listen, I believe art of any kind is generally a beautiful thing, and creating games is definitely art. But the truth is, some art's really hard to like. Not everyone thinks Picasso's work's incredible, not everyone likes the Stones. You know, people have different tastes. But there are a shit ton of people who hate this game. So, for the sake of argument, let's take a closer look at Shaq Fu, run through some of its quirks, and try to find something to like about it. We probably won't, but we're gonna try.
Nintendo video games.
Marry me with my money.
Now you're playing with power.
1994 was a solid year for games. Super Metroid, Doom 2, Donkey Kong Country, the list goes on. Fantastic games, legends in the golden era of console gaming. One of the games I wouldn't put on this list is Shaq Fu. The game's publisher, Electronic Arts, had a little experience in sports games at this point, with a couple of Madden games under their belts, and NBA Jam was a bestseller in '93, plus fighting games like Street Fighter II were huge at the time. Somehow, the idea of combining an NBA game with a 2D fighter sounded like a match made in heaven to EA. I think it sounds like the tail end of a coke bender, but either way, we ended up with Shaq Fu. So why Shaquille O'Neal, you might ask? Well, that part I get. He was Rookie of the Year in '93, he put out a terrible rap album for some reason. Hell, he even starred in Blue Chips.
Neon, please try not to step on the children.
Okay, alright.
Even if he wasn't like 9 feet tall, you couldn't avoid Shaq back then. But for all the stuff I heard about him, I don't remember a single person saying he knew Kung Fu. Which makes sense, since in this game, he also doesn't know Kung Fu. Before you get excited, Shaq Fu might as well not even have a plot. I mean, they tried. The story is that Shaq was wandering around in Tokyo and stumbled into a dojo where a creepy old dude told him he was the chosen one or some shit, and he had to rescue a kid he'd never met from a mummy. Look, I can't fault them for trying, but once you get past the 2 minutes of plotline, you're pretty much forgetting about any story anyhow, because you'll be way too focused on the gameplay. Or really the lack of gameplay. Okay, first off, there's not a lot of game in this game. In terms of structure, there's a single-player story option, a 2-player option, and head-to-head against the computer. In 2-player head-to-head, you can select from 7 characters on the Super Nintendo, and there were an additional 5 if you played it on the Sega Genesis. In story mode, you got 9 levels on Genesis, with only 6 including the boss fight on Nintendo, but believe me, 6 is more than enough. I should also point out that for the Sega version, apparently you also end up fighting the kid you're trying to save and his grandpa. I'm not saying any of this makes sense. Stop expecting this to make sense. It doesn't. Unfortunately, that captivating plot we talked about seems to be the part of this game they put the most thought into. Because for all the times it tries to convince you it's a fighting game, the ability to actually fight was pretty much overlooked entirely. In each level you play, it's you against another character, with basically no backstory aside from that little blurb you get in the beginning and the end of the fight. That's pretty much a straight copy of Street Fighter and a bunch of the other fighting games at the time, but hey, it was a working formula, so I get it. In the story mode, you only play as Shaq. Shaq only has a handful of moves, which follow the typical formula: fast kick, fast punch, slow punch, and a block. Apparently he also has the ability to taunt his opponent too, but I don't get it. Look, I'm not saying I would want a giant like Shaq taunting me in real life, but in the game, it does basically nothing, except open you up to attacks even more than usual, which is already a huge issue in this game. There are a couple special moves each character has, and some of them are pretty tough to counter. For Shaq though, we get the Shaq Yuriken, his version of the famous Hadouken from Street Fighter. I wouldn't bother trying to use it though, since 99% of the time you can't, and when you can, it doesn't do jack shit. There is one part I thought was faithful to the real Shaquille O'Neal. He's not exactly known for being super fast on the court, and he's equally slow and lumbering in this game. In all honesty, it feels like there's a lag between the buttons and actually doing anything, no matter what system you play it on, so most of the time you're either jump kicking or just aimlessly jumping back and forth. And that's an important point too. Avoiding taking damage in these fights is basically impossible. Jumping, which is really the only thing Shaq does well here, is still bad because it's either too long or too short, neither of which is helpful as most of the opponents you face have magical attacks of some kind, and you basically can't avoid them. If you ever do manage to get through the fights though, your reward is a blissfully quick wrap up to the story. Congratulations, you saved the kid. Now to get back to your charity basketball... Oh wait, there's more. You have to play against the beast monster you just defeated. In basketball. Thankfully, you don't end up actually playing street ball against a demon, but it's implied enough to make you regret ever playing this game in the first place. Seriously though, that's the whole game. You'll probably die a ton of times getting through the fights in story mode, and you only have limited lives and continues, so if you really want to see it through to the end, it could take you a while. Not that I encourage that, or even playing this game. In fact, I strongly encourage you go do almost anything else instead. Seriously, here's a brief list of things I'd recommend doing instead of playing Shaq Fu. Get a discount root canal. Listen to a kid cry about something stupid. Spend a night in jail with Big Mike. Tell a good dog that he's a bad boy. Get a dry colonoscopy. Give a cat an ice bath, deep lung and egg fart. Get another dry colonoscopy. Enjoy a hover hand from Donald Trump. And lastly, use a dive bar bathroom on 2-for-1 Taco Tuesday. I'm not going to spend much time on the music in this game. In a lot of shitty games from this era, you could depend on at least a good soundtrack to add some value. They managed to take generic beats and salt in just enough racial undertones to make you feel like you were in a magic island that's definitely not in India or the Middle East or something. I'd give the music a 2 out of 10 for at least not driving me insane, because the game did a good enough job doing that. Overall, the graphics weren't that bad considering everything else. Sure, Shaq didn't really look like Shaq, but overall the animations are pretty well done, and even the strangely familiar island motif they created had a certain vibe to it. I'd give it a solid 5 out of 10 for the time. All in all, I think I've made my opinion pretty clear. This game is basically universally disliked regardless of the system you play it on, and I can understand why. Try to remember, when this game came out, it was retailing for almost $70. I'm not bullshitting you, the game cost $70 on release. That's like $140 in today's money, and I'm willing to bet it had a lot to do with the celebrity endorsement. Just imagine the fucking disappointment of begging your parents to buy you Shaq Fu, and then actually having to play Shaq Fu. Let's just say there's a reason our generation is chronically depressed. Oh, I forgot to mention one other thing. Because the world is a nightmarish hellscape these days that makes no sense whatsoever, apparently they made a sequel to this piece of shit in 2018 called Shaq Fu: A Legend Reborn. It was crowdfunded on Indiegogo, which proves only that people really do want to watch the world burn at this point. If you think that's bad, it appears they released DLC a little while after launch called Barack Fu: Adventures of Dirty Barry, where you played as Barack Obama as he goes through France and outer space to defeat Kanye West. I have not played it, I will not play it, so good luck if you decide to, but please, let's just take a moment to think about the next generation for a minute. Think of the children.